Friends, it's Rick, and this is your seat at the table. Excuse me, it's just woke up a little bit ago. Gotta get our act together this morning, right? Okay. Bit of coffee. On a positive side note for me, I managed to find me one of them folding extendable arm doohickeys with a light on it. I've been trying to find one in the store for quite a long time, but they apparently never seem to be in any of the stores I go to. And I've wanted one for a long time because I want to replace. What you can't see here is I have an extendable boom, one of those things, a selfie stick, and it's basically duct taped to the edge of the table over here that acts as the support, the camera that I have up here. So I'm hoping sometime whenever the hell it gets delivered, I will be able to update this, and I'll have a better way to raise and lower the device, and it'll have a light on it, so it will help illuminate the space a little better. I'm just hoping that it plays out that way, because I never know for sure. Anyway, we're going to continue looking at this game not traveled, and that would be Stellar Frontiers or Interstellar Frontiers or whatever the name may or may never end up being. I keep poking away at it little at little, but eventually I will get an actual digital copy, converting this to a pure digital format, and then I intend to absolutely put it out on drive-through RPG for a minimal amount of money, if not zero, just to see it published, just to see it in the hands of a few people who may enjoy it, or at least collect dust on some many other people's shelves. That's just neither here nor there. So what I'm doing is bringing my exchange up to date for the pending cycle 8 or turn 8. This exchange serves a number of purposes. It allows us to track all of our materials, whether mined or manufactured, whether we're storing them in a warehouse for future builds, or if we're potentially selling them to arriving traders and starships, to generate revenue for our house, or what our house is making off of the exchange. Ideally, you want more positives than negatives, although it is possible to have too much positive, because this set of charts over here to the right, this is how we determine what the basic tonnage that's available on your exchange is valued at to sell per ton to an incoming ship, as opposed to the other way around. If I have a need and I don't have anything to support that need, then I'm going to be running a bigger negative, and it costs more, of course. And so when a ship brings up something to sell to me and I purchase it, I will purchase it at this rate per ton. The other side of this is the helps generate revenue. So we determine how much of our negatives outweigh our positives and vice versa. And generally speaking, it takes a few cycles to start to see a profit. You can really go into the hole if you're not cautious. And this expedites the use. It really emphasizes why your mining ships really matter, and your scout ship. So you should be scouting additional planets and systems and asteroid belts, anything that can get you the minerals, resources that you lack locally, and to mine them and bring them back in enough quantity to put them in and to plug in those negatives to reverse them into positives and help to meet the needs of your planet. That's why they call it a speculative exchange or something of that nature. I'll tell you, I'm not a financial guy, so I'm the last person to be asking about sort of stuff. Anyway, so I've already went through most of it, because it would be an awful boring video. I mean, I know these videos are not overly popular, and they're not overly entertaining because it's pretty dry stuff. A couple notes. I've learned that the algorithms for YouTube, the more you can post on a regular basis, the more likely you are your channels to get seen by people and to bring new players or new people to the table. And so in that effort, it's an opportunity to do these videos. It's just, if you want to call it fluff, so be it. But it also gives me an opportunity to knock the rust off of my knowledge for my own game system and actually put it into play a little bit. So some of these things are much worse than others when it comes to dryness and how things play out. So, if you stick with me and you stick through it, I'm grateful for it. If you dial out, hey, I get it too. So we're going to look at the last handful of items that are on my exchange. So we start with utility vehicles. This comes into play because one of my previous videos, I set up both a couple house uh, rangers, or these would be NPCs that will allow us to do things on a more detailed level. And I also set up my first militia, the first platoon of my house militia, and I had to determine whether or not I could motorize them or not. I do not have enough utility vehicles and storage, tonnage-wise, to issue vehicles to my militia, but I could issue some, quote, Tech 1 ATVs or motorcycles, however you wish to choose them. They're based off of the Tech 1 Imperium standard technology, would be equivalent to modern day equipment. So in potential, if you had a winter planet and you want to issue them an ATV, perhaps it's some futuristic version of a snowmobile, but it's going to be mechanically driven, preferably with a wheel of track. And generally, ideally, track vehicles tend to come into the category 2 tech levels, but in this case, I issued them ATVs, so they can be 2 wheels, 4 wheels, 6 wheels, 3 wheels, 5 wheels. As long as you're happy with it, it doesn't really matter. So my plan is current builds. The current factory only produces 5 tons of utility vehicles per cycle. And my consumption for all my builds, all my civilian consumption, all this comes to 18. So obviously, I am not producing nowhere near as many utility vehicles as what the planet desires or needs. And I also, in addition to this, once again, I need these utility vehicles for other purposes. Some builds, to build new factories and things like this, some of them require a certain amount of utility vehicles, and those can be translated into forklifts, mini excavators, whatever the hell you want to call them. It doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, we're not going into that deep of a hole, but the main point is you still want to use them. So you have an option. My option was to take my production and put it in the warehouse, not to put it into the exchange. So instead of reducing my negative 18 tons per cycle consumption of utility vehicles to a negative 13, which would lower the negative price and help my bottom line, I choose to put them in the warehouse. And then I devoted X amount of tonnage to my agents to give each agent a ATV. So this left me with 4.4 extra in the warehouse and no surplus. So I'm going to base the 18 as my negative, and we're going to see if I can get my calculator to light up. Turn it on. Turn it on. Come on. This thing is solar powered, and it's turn the solar off a little. There we go. I know you can't really see. This is why I really am looking forward to the ability to lower this thing down to bring it closer to some things. So I have a positive surplus chart that runs from 1 ton to 100 tons. And then there's some caveats to what to do when it exceeds 100 tons. And then there's the negative surplus chart, which runs from a -1 to a -100, of course, with caveats on how to lower it. And the formula for value is pretty simple. If I have a surplus item, 1 ton is worth 0.99 credits, and it descends. So the larger my surplus is, the less value they are. I mean, the more you have of something, the cheaper it ought to be. The opposite of place is the negative. So the higher my negatives, the more expensive it's going to cost when I want to make up for that, to purchase them from somebody that's showing up, and or to my bottom line. So in this case, I have a -18, which is quite high for a cycle. Technically, we're still in the end of cycle 7, so you know, for an actual full cycle, that's pretty bad. So I look at my -18, and it says 1.18. So I'm going to take the 18, and I'm going to take it times 1.18. And once you get the hang of how this works, you can actually do this pretty easily in your head. So make sure I got it right. 18 times 1.18 equals 21.2. So my negative for utility vehicles is 21.2. So I'm going to put negative 21.2 here. And then I have my next one is a negative 0.5. And then I have weapon material. Now, weapon material is it's a catch-all for ammunition, munitions for your autocannons and for your missile batteries and things like this, as well as your pistols and rifles and grenades. It's like a ubiquitous term for all this stuff, so we can account for it without having 5,000 different freaking things. So in our case, our factories produce a surplus of 15 tons, and we do not have any needs directly. So once my military units are established, I'm going to say, my militia platoon may use 0.01 ton of munitions every cycle, every 10 days, and in the line of their duty. So if they're out there practicing on the firing line every couple days or every day, they're burning through ammunition or that sort of thing. In this case, I haven't established that, so I have a surplus of 15. I'm going to choose to put 5 of that into my warehouse. So I now have 5 tons put aside into my warehouse. And this means, so down the road, I'm going to be able to accumulate things. It's like the utility vehicles. I chose to put that surplus in the warehouse. So next cycle, I have 4.6 plus. So if I choose to put that other 5 in there, then it'll be 9.6, etc. And we want to build up this surplus because, once again, I'm going to build builds, more factories, more housing complexes, new things that my colony doesn't have. To do that, I need to accumulate all the material required to produce it, and then I have to finance it. Then it takes 5 cycles for it to be produced or to be constructed, and that's just the nature kind of how a builder works. So in this case, it leaves me with 10. So it leaves me a surplus of 10. So I have 10 tons of weapon grade material on my exchange for sale, and at 10 tons on the positive chart, that is 0.9. So I'm going to have a positive of 9.0 here. And then, of course, I got this last one here. It's a -2 uridium or whatever it is. I got all these things off the periodical chart. So, and I've had people go, "Oh, well, that's not a real thing. That's something we make." Well, I don't care. I don't care if you can't mine it. That's just you can in the future. Who knows what's available out there in the universe? So it's 2.04, and I always round up or round down. So in this case, rounding up or down, it's just going to give me a -2. So -2. Now, the point of the surplus tells me how much I have available for sale. This is also the surplus that I can tap. So when my ship arrives, I bring my colony ship back, or I mean my scout ship back, or my shuttle, or my mining ship back to the planet. Now I need to restock things. Maybe I need to use some munitions at some point, fired the weapons on my scout, and my scout's going to need to replenish its weapons if it has them. This surplus, I have 2 choices. I can deduct it from the surplus, thus reducing the surplus, or I can deduct it from the warehouse, which just reduces the stuff in the warehouse. Reducing your surplus on your exchange reduces the value of what that produces financially for your exchange. It also reduces how much you have to sell to incoming ships. So if I roll a ship event and a trader or a star marshal or whatever arrives on my planet and they land, they're probably going to want to restock their consumables: food, fuel, water, oxygen, and on a rare occasion, munitions. And so this is another way to generate a form of income. So I would sell to them 10 tons of whatever they need, or in this case, they want 2 tons of munitions. I would sell them 2 tons at the 9-ton surplus. So I would sell 2 tons at 0.91 credits and gain a 1.82 profit by doing so. And that's just kind of how this stuff plays out. So in this case, I started with utility vehicles. So I want to total up my total negatives. My total negatives are going to be pretty damn high, which is going to bite. It's going to suck, and that's going to encourage me once again to send my ships out and mine many different locations as possible to bring material back to fill in the blanks. So using this as an example, xenon, Xe, is between weapon grade material iridium. I have no production. I have no needs for it. So I have nothing in the warehouse, and nobody's come along and sold me any. So I have nothing here. So I am not making money nor losing money. But if I went out and I mined 10 tons, and I could put 10 tons on the surplus, well, now I would gain 0.9 or 9.0 credits every turn until somebody either buys the xenon, I develop some need for it and start reducing that stockpile, or I mine more of it and bring more back. So there's some sweet spots, and I believe the sweet spot for the exchange is 50 tons. If I can get it to 50 tons, then I make a good turnaround. I'm making around 25.5 credits per 50 for the 50 tons. But once that 50 ton surplus starts to get higher, the value starts to decrease, and you actually start to lose money because you have a larger surplus. This is in part where your warehouse comes in. You're allowed to ship or slip some of that into your warehouse to store it, to stabilize to get that sweet spot as much as you can. The downside is that your exchange and your surplus have limits. So until you build an additional warehouse complex, which is doable, you won't. The bottom line on an active exchange for this level of our system, so our keeping in line, our planetary lord is still a squire. So the value is going to be 150 tons max in the warehouse and 150 tons max in the exchange. Now, for storage purposes, there are other means. Like I said, you can get prefab warehouses and storage units to store things outside the storage facility complex. You cannot, on the other hand, stockpile things outside, literally. You can't just decide I'm going to dump it out here on the ground and make use of it, because we went down that rabbit hole before and we just decided anything that gets stored outside is subject to being confiscated, stolen, or destroyed by the weather. So, no. Your warehouse hits its max, then you can't put any more in it until you either move it out to some other, use it somehow, or you manage to sell it somehow or ship it off. So in that case, if you're sending mining ships out to mine, and your mining ship is set up to mine 5 different things, and that's one of those things, you can be in a risk of filling your entire mining ship up over time with that one item and reducing its capacity. So there's incentives for you to find ways to sell it off. And generally there are ways to do that, but we're not going to touch on that at the moment. So when I take my negatives up to this point, and I want to add the additional ones to my total, and I'm already groaning in my head because and I'm going to down here and say I have a negative total of 212.1. That is pretty high, but that's to be expected since this is actually the only first full working exchange cycle of exchange. So keeping in mind my planet has a mining facility and it will continue to mine every cycle, and so on cycles 8 I will have mined another round of material which will go into those slots and raise the surplus up, and hopefully bring down that negative, as well as my mining ships are going to keep going out, and I'm going to send them different places as much as I can to get as many blanks filled in as I can. So we'll look at our positives. Our positives are all less than half of our negatives, so we're already majorly in the hole. So the only positive I add here is that 9 from the weapon grade material, which brings me to a positive of 91. So it just gets better and better and better. So I'm going to go here and I'm just going to go run across the board. My planet for this cycle, the colony's expenses for running the government is 51 credits. My build taxes, or what my platinums are paying the house in revenue from their operations, is 26.5, which puts me at a negative 25 or 22.5. So 22.5 plus 212.1 equals negative 234.6. Right? And then we're going to look at our positives, which only positive I have right now is 91, so I'm going to have 234.6 minus 91 equals 143. So I am in the hole this cycle for the cycle 143.6. And I started with a surplus. I brought 500 credits, or however you want to look at it, 500 million credits to my planet with me, and so I have to subtract the difference. I still have a positive surplus of cash on hand, 356.4. So a couple cycles of without doing anything is going to eliminate my positives completely, and then I'm going to be in a bad spot because I'm not going to be able to build new builds directly from the house. I need to finance them. So one of the things I want to do in cycle 8 is establish exactly what it is the building I'm going to build next. And I can go ahead and preemptively pay for that, which would come out of my surplus income, my surplus treasury, and that way it's already paid for. And I've already started allotting things to my storage for potential builds. And this is one of those things that I had to make kind of have to make a decision. So I could have chose, if I look at administrative materials alone, my planet produces 10 tons and I consume 11.6. So I'm running a negative of 1.6. I chose to divert 5 tons of my production to the warehouse, which now means I have a negative of 6.6, the 5 surplus minus the 11.6, which give me a negative 7.7 credits. So I could have applied the entire 10 tons, which then would have given me a negative of 1.6. You see, so that does, there's ways to bring that negative down for your planetary operation without, the downside is you're not stockpiling things. And I decided to do just as much of that as I can, because some of this is going to be required to make that build. And so once again, ideally, I'm going to keep having at least one scout ship exploring. Once I know my system has been established, I know what the mineral resources are and where, and I'm pretty much at that point now. My next move will be to send a scout ship to an adjacent, within 2 light years of my house capital, to see to open a new system up and hopefully not see my scout destroyed in the initial process, and then discover more resource material locations to send my mining ships to. I said early on, I'm always reluctant to use my mining ships for exploration into new systems because there's a significant risk. It's not massive, but there is a risk that you can jump into a system and discover a space hazard that eliminates your ship. That's a bad day. You only have limited resources to start with, and we're not in a position to be building new ships just yet. That's probably 10, 15 cycles down the road at some point. Anyway, this is Rick, and I hope I didn't bore you too much. Till next time. Going on, my friends, this is Rick, and hey, if you like the channel, please hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, tell your buddies, tell your friends.